Alright, so intro to complex numbers. We're going to start off in box uno. So in box one, you're asking yourself, what is an imaginary number? Well, I'm glad you asked. Well, an imaginary number is an I. It's a little lowercase I, with a little italicized to it. And what it means is that you have a negative underneath the square root. Previously, when you had a negative underneath the square root, you'd have to write no solution. Yay, I'm done. Not anymore. Not anymore. Okay? So our imaginary number is I equals the square root of negative 1. I squared equals negative 1. Because when you square something, a square root, it essentially sets the value underneath 3. And what this allows us to do is, this allows us to solve all quadratic equations. Oh. No quadratic left behind. So again, I is our imaginary, and it equals the square root of negative 1. So when I see the square root of negative 1, I get to change it into an I. If I see I squared, I get to change it into a negative 1. So let's do some little examples here. So let's practice some simplifying. So if I have the square root of negative 4, what I'm going to do is separate my negative and my real. So I would separate square root of 4 times square root of negative 1. I need to do that in white. And so what is the square root of 4?
2.
Not just 2, but plus or minus 2, right? And what did it say? If you see the square root of negative 1, it becomes a what? An I. Bam! You just did an imaginary number. And you survived.
Let's say 2.
Yes. My head is 9, so my 2 got a little more. Alright, let's try one that doesn't simplify. So if I have the square root of negative 5, so with the square root of negative 5, I can separate the negative 1 times the square root of 5. If I have a negative 1, what does that mean? Square root of negative 1 means I write in I. But we also, every time you get the square root of something, you have to put a, so it's plus or minus I, and 5 stays in the radical, because it cannot be simplified.
Let's upside down, question mark.
It's an I.
No, it's an I. Let's try another one. So the square root of negative 36.
This is only box 1.
Yep. So when I separate, I have 36 times the square root of negative 1. And what's the square root of 36? Plus or minus 6. And what's the square root of negative I? Negative 1? I. And I'm missing an example, so we're going to do it anyway. So if I have the square root of negative 32, and I separate my positive and my negative, does 32 factor perfectly? No, we've done this before, right? 32 factors down to being 4 square root of 2. So notice this would still be I, so we come down to plus or minus 4I square root of 2. It just joins the number on the outside. It does not stay underneath the radical, it joins the value on the outside. So that would be my imaginary. Okay, these are examples of what we call pure imaginaries, because they have no real components. Is it terrible working with an I? No, not at all. Alright, now, 2. What is a complex number? Again, you can pick and choose what you want to write. If all you're like, I understand this, I just need to see the examples. So a complex number consists of a real part and an imaginary part. And it's written as a plus bi, where a and b are both real numbers. So you were written as a plus bi. So if you look at our example 1, I have 2 minus 3i. 2 is my real part, and negative 3i is my imaginary. If you look at example 2, negative 1 is my real, and I is my imaginary. And if you look at example 3, again, this is a pure imaginary. That's because the real part is a 0. Are we comfortable with what a complex number looks like? A plus bi. Yes, no, maybe so. Yeah, comfortable, not comfortable, deep down. All right. Everyone say yay. Everyone. All right, so in box 3, we're going to talk about adding and subtracting your complex numbers. So when you're adding and subtracting your complex numbers, all you're doing is combining the real parts together and then combining your imaginary parts. So you're combining. So let's look at example 1. So in example 1, we have 2i plus negative 4 minus 2i. Because there's no negative out here for me to distribute, I can actually just get rid of the parentheses. So this is 2i minus 4 minus 2i. And what we're trying to write in the form is a plus bi. So the first thing we want to do is combine our real. So what is my real part here? Negative 4 is my real. Do we all see that? So I'm going to take negative 4 out. And then we're going to combine our imaginary. Well, my imaginary is 2i and negative 2i. Well, when I combine them, what do I get? 0i. So therefore my simplified answer is just negative 4. How do you feel about it so far? Alright, so let's look at the next one. So in example 2, this time is not addition, and so actual subtraction on the outside. So before I can do anything, I have to distribute that negative. So when I distribute that negative, I have 5 plus 6i plus 2 minus 4i. I'm going to combine my reals, and my reals are 5 and positive 2. What does 5 and positive 2 make? 7. Combine my imaginaries, I have positive 6i and negative 4i. And what does that make? So my answer is 7 plus 2i. How do you feel about adding and subtracting? Did we do anything different with I than we would do with X? Nothing. Nothing different. Good? Not good? Okay. Any questions about adding and subtracting? So after adding and subtracting, what comes next? Multiplying and dividing. But we're only going to do multiplying. Dividing, we're going to wait till Friday. It's a little It's a little weird. So we don't need it quite yet, but we're gonna wait. So right now I'm gonna go into box 4, and box 4 is where we're going to multiply. So when you're multiplying complex numbers, you're either using the distributive property or you're using FOIL. It depends on the situation. So in our example 1, are we using distributive or FOIL? Distributive. So we're going to distribute 3i, and again, you're going to treat it just as if you would treat an x. So we have 3i times 1 is, and we have 3i times negative 2i, which is negative 6i squared. What did we say I squared meant? Negative 1. So as soon as you see a negative I squared, you turn it into a negative 1. Negative 6 and negative 1 makes what? Positive 6. You can either leave it in this form, but is that our complex number form? No, so we'll switch it. Positive 6, positive 3i. So our answer is 6 plus 3i. How did you feel about distribution? Is the silence a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. Yay, we distributed. All right, next, FOIL. So you either can FOIL or you can box if you're a box person. Is there anyone who wants me to see this modeled as a box? Are we all okay with just foiling? Again, silence means Ms. Jones do whatever you want. Oh, okay, cool. So we'll go ahead and FOIL. So FOIL says I'm going to take the first two terms and multiply them. So 4 times 1 is 4. Then I'm going to take my outside terms and multiply them. 4 times negative 2i is negative 8i. I tells me I'm going to take my inside terms and multiply them. 3i times 1 is 3i. And then L says I'm going to take my last two terms and multiply them. So 3i times negative 2i is negative 6i squared. After you FOIL, you combine like terms and simplify. So my like terms are negative 8i and 3i, and that makes what? Negative 5i. I'm going to simplify, and instead of I squared, I write a negative 1. And now I have 4 minus 5i plus 6. What are my like terms that can be combined?
4 and 6.
4 and 6, and they make what?
2.
So we have 10 minus 5i is my complex solution. Bam. Yay! Did anyone need to see the box? I don't mind doing it. Are we truly okay with FOIL? Okay. How do you feel? Easy peasy?